Most people try and fix shin splints by adding exercises and pushing through the pain, but that is exactly how you turn a small problem into a stress fracture. In this video, we'll go through everything you need to know in terms of treating shin splints. You'll see how this simple method that I use with my clients and my shin splints program actually works, as well as if it'll work for you and how it can prevent shin splints from returning. But first, why doesn't adding exercises, stretching, ice, and just pushing through the pain actually work for shin splints? Because shin splints are not just a tight muscle, in fact they're not a muscle condition at all, it is actually an overuse of the shin bone named the tibia. Here's what happens. Every time our foot lands and hits a surface, there is a huge amount of force that goes through the shin. With shin splints, the shin bone, the tibia, is actually under more force than it can actually handle. And there are two ways that this plays out, so there are two theories. The first is called the bone stress theory, and the theory goes that every time we have impact in our shin, there are tiny micro cracks that occur. Now usually there is a balance between repair and this damage that is perfectly equalized, so the body can repair it. However, with shin splints, it becomes to the point where the amount of damage we accumulate is outweighed by the amount that our body can repair it. This causes that area of bone, that part right on the inside of your shin, to end up becoming weaker, and actually if you keep pushing through that pain, those micro fractures will then become an actual stress fracture. And this is where actually some people say that shin splint is actually a spectrum of a stress fracture. The second theory is called the periosteal traction theory, and it revolves around something called the periosteum, which is the sensitive layer that wraps around the bone. So we have the bone itself, so the tibia, but it actually has this layer around it called the periosteum. And all the muscles around the shin, so we have the calf muscles, the gastrocnemius, and the soleus muscle. We have small little ankle muscles like the posterior tibialis, and we have things that control the toes, like the flexum digitorum. These all attach to this periosteal layer around the shin, and if we use them a lot, like we do when running, so the muscles are pulling on this layer of bone, we actually end up having it pulled away slightly from the bone and becomes slightly inflamed, which then leads to the pain. So those are the two theories. Either it's too much stress on the bone causing microfractures, or it's too much force on the periosteum causing inflammation, and it's more than likely that everybody just has a bit of those two. But here's why it matters. If you add extra stress then to this system, so you're adding in more exercises, you're pushing through the pain, you're actually just adding stress onto a system which is already overstressed. You are not going to give the tibia any time to heal, and in fact you may push it to the point where you do end up with a stress fracture, and then you've turned it into a problem that may be resolved in a few weeks to one which may now take months. And this is really why so many people fail with shin splints, because they take everything they know about dealing with muscle and tendon issues and they apply it into shin splints when it's the complete wrong approach. So the real question becomes, well, how do you fix it? And to demonstrate this, let me show you the method that I use with one of my clients, and we're going to call them Sarah. Sarah came to me whilst training for a half marathon. She had downloaded a half marathon training program online. It was an okay program, but it was just way too sharp for her. So her mileage increased really quickly, and what started as just a very dull ache in her shin, after about 3 weeks had become a really sharp pain in her shin, and she couldn't even run a mile. At that point, she had also tried foam rolling, she tried stretching, she tried a lot of ice and cryotherapy, but nothing had worked up to that point. The first thing we did was completely calm down the shin. That was our whole focus. We took as much force as we could off the shin so it could heal. That meant no walking if we could avoid it, no running for sure, and definitely no hills or hard surfaces. Instead, we had her go on a stationary bike that she already had at home, and we threw in a couple of calf isometrics as well as some hip exercises just to keep her muscles active whilst we took a lot of force off of that shin. We continued that offloading of the shin until she could walk around the house, do about 30 minutes of walking with absolutely no pain in the shin, and that really indicated that the shin had calmed down a lot, and it took a couple of weeks. From there, it was really about ramping up that strength. Lots of hips, lots of calves, just to really maximize her strength. And we did add in a little bit of plyos just to start getting a little bit of stimulation through the shins. But still, no running and no really hard surfaces at that time. Just adding in a little bit of strength. Finally, after about 3 weeks of not running at all, just doing the stationary bike, the test we did is 15 single leg hops. So just hopping on one leg 15 times. And once she could do that, that for me was the green light that we can now go back to doing some very light running. We reintroduced the running with what we call interval running. So we did 1 minute run, 2 minutes walk. So it was interval, so we're not a straight continuous run. And we did that for about 10 cycles to start with, and then we just gradually ramped that up over the week. We kept increasing the amount of time that she was running for a couple of weeks after that until she could run continuously for 30 minutes. That was then the next green light where we can now add in more plyometrics and now get her more on the road to getting back to her previous mileage and really the mileage that she would need to train for a half marathon. She kept progressing slowly and we only increased the mileage by 15% per week. That was the key number, and we just increased her mileage 15% a week all the way until she got back to her usual mileage. Sarah's story really shows how this method works. We first have to completely calm down the shin by taking all force off the shin. Then we add in some strength to make sure all the muscles are nice and strong. Then we introduce some gradual impact. And then afterwards, we just make sure that we progress that mileage really gently. And that is how we heal shin splints whilst trying to maintain as much fitness as we can. By now, you may be asking, well, will this actually work for me? And that's a completely fair question because a lot of the time recovery is never straightforward. Every runner and athlete experiences it. You feel like you recover, you go back to running, you flare up again, and then you're right back where you started, and recovery just seems completely unpredictable and just horrifically slow. And it is that experience that really makes people doubt whether they're doing the right thing and actually if they may well be the exception of which this method will not work for. But those setbacks and flare-ups aren't failures, they're just part of the process and should be expected. This method works for anybody, whether it be a 5K runner all the way through to somebody doing an ultra marathon, because it targets the root cause of shin splints, which is an overuse injury of the bone. The principles are the same. Now the duration may differ, but you calm the shin, build up strength, introduce load, and then building up gradually, and that will apply to anybody dealing with shin splints. So the big question is, will it prevent shin splints from returning and coming back? The sad reality is, for a lot of runners, shin splints will come back. You fix the shin splints, you feel good, you go for a run, and it comes right on back. It's a really common story. But it's not really a random story, it's very predictable and very understandable. It is simply based on how your body adapts. If you've taken a few weeks off running, your muscles and your lungs will bounce back really quickly. Within a few weeks, you'll feel just as you did before. But bones and ligaments sometimes, but we're focusing on the bone, they adapt really slowly. So whilst your muscles and your lungs will say go, 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 the rest of your body will really need to adapt at a slower pace. And it is really why this mismatch causes a lot of shin splints to reoccur, because people recover, they feel okay because they don't have the symptoms, they then come back to running, they feel good, but they forget that their shins probably aren't fully recovered because it takes months, and so they just go straight back to square one. So can you prevent this from happening to yourself? And of course you can. All it takes is a lot of preparation, understanding the condition, and just being very respectful of this mismatch in terms of adaptation speed. And the key rule is what we call the 10 to 15% rule, which is don't increase your mileage. You can also do it for time, but mileage is more common, by more than 10 to 15% per week. This allows your bones to adapt to whatever you're doing without overloading it, where you end up then causing yourself shin splints. And it is that clever programming of just increasing 10 to 15% a week which really prevents shin splints from coming back. If you'd like to see how I deal with shin splints personally, or if you'd like a personalized program, all the details will be in the description below. And if you'd like to watch another video, then YouTube has suggested this video right here.